Let us go into the presentation. Let's start with like what will be the contents. So contents will be introduction into IC, then a little bit on instrumentation, a couple of sample preparation techniques, quite interesting ones, and applications in different industries. So let's see where IC is used in different industries. So introduction into IC. So I presume like you all would have attended the very fantastic and fabulous lectures since last 1 week by Dr. Rama, Dr. Datar, and Dr. Deepak Velani on LC, GC, as well as GCMS and LCMS. So this is just an extension of that technique. So IC is just an extension of liquid chromatography, I should say. And here, instead of compounds, whether it is polar, non-polar, we are talking only about ions. So here we talk about only negative ions, which are anions, and positive ions, which are cations. So of course, there are importance of determining those ions. Why nitrate has to be determined, why bromate has to be determined, why perchlorate has to be determined. All those, they have their own importances. Then here, as any other chromatography, the input is always a mixture, and the output expected is the separated components from a mixture. Either you can do it qualitatively or you can do it quantitatively, but majority IC are quantitative. IC is being used as quantitative technique. So the analytes, as you know, they compete for their places in the stationary phase, which is otherwise called as column, and the eluent, or I should say mobile phase. So the stronger the concentration of the eluent, shorter is the retention time. So this is usual. And if you see the interaction, it's going to be purely positive attracting negative and negative attracting positive. So if I have to do a cation, that is positively charged ion, I need opposite charge in my column so that it is retained and released based on the chromatographic conditions. So how does IC work? So components are separated by stationary and mobile phase. There are different mechanisms: ion exchange, ion pair, ion exclusion. But we can say that 98 to 99% of the applications is majorly ion exchange chromatography only. And if you see, this technique can be used for right from PPT, I'm talking about parts per trillion, to percentage. Parts per trillion, who does? Semiconductor industry. So they do. Power plant, they do. They monitor sodium, and they're talking about 100 PPT, 50 PPT analysis. Similarly, semiconductor industries, they are talking about same levels. So their matrix has to be as clean as possible. One more information: IC is aqueous based, that is water based technique. So the water which we use for IC, that is ion chromatography, performing an IC, should be as pure as possible. So we are talking about ppm and ppb, sub ppb levels. So that means the water what we use for this technique has to be ultra pure. So that means we have to use 18.2 mega ohms water for this technique, because we have to prepare solvents or samples using this ultra pure water. That is very, very important. Coming to the instrumentation, so you can see that instrumentation remains the same as any other liquid chromatography. Eluent is being constantly pumped through the entire system by the pump. Its pump is again a dual piston pump. Only big difference is here we don't have any stainless steel pumps, or the flow path is not stainless steel. Here we have entire flow path is polymer, made of polymer. It is called PEEK, polyether ether ketone, which has a very good stability again for entire pH range 0 to 14, and has a very good stability compliance with solvents which are normally used in IC. This methanol, acetone, and acetonitrile. So these are the normally solvents which are used. Let's see where it is used also. Then we have the injector, where you're going to introduce the sample. You can inject even 1 microliter, or you can even inject 1 ml, depending on the requirement. So you can inject a fixed volume, as well as if you can inject variable volume also. Column is the heart of the system, as you know. Then the detection is, of course, different detectors. So far you have come across probably UV detector, fluorescence detector, diode array detectors, PDA, photodiode array, etc., RI or ELSG. So far you have come across, and of course you have come across mass also. So here it's entirely different. Of course, you can use those detectors also, but here mainly it is conductivity detector because you're talking about ions, and ions will have conductivity. Let's go step by step. If I have to perform ion chromatograph, so what is the criteria? So that means the analyte of interest should be ionic in nature. So that means if you have a solid sample, you have to bring it into liquid form, and then you have to ensure that your analyte of interest is in whether it's in positive ion form or negative ion form. That is one. That is must. Second is stationary phase. That is the column has to be ionic in nature. So you can see here there is a table which gives you a comparison, this graph. So between what is normal phase, what is reverse phase, and what is ion exchange. So you can see here, number one, with respect to normal phases, we have a polar stationary and non-polar mobile. And in the reverse phase, you have polar mobile phase and non-polar stationary phase. So you are well aware of these techniques now. So with respect to ion exchange, it is going to be stationary phase will be ionic and mobile phase will be ionic. So this is number 4. So this is the next criteria. So stationary phase has to be ionic in nature. Similarly, mobile phase should be ionic in nature. So let's see how. So you see a picture on the right side top. So that is the picture of the columns. So this is also brown in color. So as against what you normally use in HPLC, it is not stainless steel made, it is PEEK made. So entire body is made up of PEEK, and there are different lengths of columns, right from 50 millimeter, that is 5 centimeter, to 300 millimeter. So you can accommodate such columns. And with respect to what is there inside the column, which is very important for us, is this. So this is the column composition. So what is there? We have a substrate or a resin carrier, so the basic bed, and there is a spacer group which attaches the functionality group to the basic substrate. So this we call it as a spacer group. Normally, a spacer group is a ethyl or a propyl group, not more than that. So what it does, so this is the ion exchange sites which make the column ionic in nature. So that means if I have to do cations, which is positively charged, so I need an opposite charge on the column. So normally it is sulfonates or carboxylates. So this is what it is. So it is having an opposite charge. So this is what is going to play a role in retaining and releasing my cations. Similarly, for anions, we have NR3 plus, or we should say quaternary ammonium groups, or trimethylamine or alkylamine or hydroxyalkylamine groups. So this is what is going to be responsible for holding your anions and releasing them. So this is what is making the column ionic in nature. There are several manufacturing processes involved in these columns, but let us not go into it. This is a general concept that my column should be charged, should be ionic in nature. Now coming to the substrates. So we have different substrates, right from polymer to silica. The best is polymer because you have a wide chemical range because it works in all between 0 to 14 pH, but it has a poor mechanical strength. It cannot take higher flow rates or higher pressures. But silica is exactly the opposite. It has a good mechanical strength, but poor chemical strength because you're restricted, your pH range is restricted to 2 to 8. So that is a problem. So we have a choice. Now you can always choose which one you want. So this is with respect to the column. Next, coming to the mobile phase. I said that mobile phase also have to be ionic in nature. That means we cannot use solvents. So nothing will happen with if I use solvents as mobile phase. So if I use 100% methanol, so how do I elute my ion from the column? Not possible. There is no charge. There is no that which is giving competition to my sample ion. So we have to use here salts or acids. So this carbonate or bicarbonate, when I put in water, it becomes sodium plus, and if I put sodium carbonate in water, it becomes sodium plus and carbonate CO3 2 minus and HCO3 minus. Normally, bicarbonate along with carbonate is used for the buffering action to maintain the pH, of course, and carbonate is going to be the eluting ion, the competing ion with my sample ion. So if I have to do chloride, so the competing ion is going to be carbonate. And if it is going to be nitric acid, when I put in water for cation analysis, it becomes H plus and NO3 minus. That H plus is going to compete with my cations. That is my positive ions. Okay. Now, if you see these chemicals, which are normally used in IC, it is very simple. So carbonate, bicarbonate, or nitric acid, or hydroxides, or these are very easily available. So this makes the technique, I should say, the KISS principle. So keep it simple and straight. So every lab will have carbonate, bicarbonate, because they have to use these for as a primary standard in their titration or wet analysis technique. Similarly, nitric acid for sample preparation or acidification, etc. So with this, we can operate our IC with respect to anion and cation column. So this makes the technique also very simple laboratory chemicals. I said earlier that we can also use solvents like acetone, acetonitrile, and methanol. We don't use it 100% because we cannot achieve separation, but we normally use 10% or 12%, or maximum we have used up to 40%, depending on what is the analyte. So if I use 10% or 12% of acetone or acetonitrile or methanol, depending on what type of column I have, so basically it helps in improving the selectivity, and especially when we do cation analysis along with amines. So amines and acetone or acetonitrile, it's like dissolves like. It will dissolve the amines and bring it outside, bring it out of the column. So when I do cations and amines together, really the acetone and acetonitrile at around 10% or 12% really helps in resolution and selectivity. So in this way it helps. Second way how it helps is that in environmental and pharma applications, what happens is we are dealing with, let's say, domestic wastewater or industrial effluent, etc. Suppose we happen to do such samples. For example, of course, we do sample preparation, but still to take care if there is any organic moiety, which is going to have a secondary interaction with my basic material, PET material. So in order to avoid, if I use an organic modifier, it will not allow them to be retained in the column. It will simply washes them out, and thereby the column is clean and there is no performance loss and there is no masking of the ion exchange sites. In this way, organic modifiers help. So this is one this thing. Now let us see the mechanism. I am taking an example of cation separation mechanism where I am using where I am determining sodium and sodium chloride, for example. So how do I do? So I have a sample. Now I have to do sodium. Now I have to choose a column, a cation exchanger, which is having opposite charge. So that means I have to choose a column which is having sulfonic acid group. Now, normally in chromatography, what we do is we flush the column with mobile phase and we expect the baseline to stabilize. So here also it is the same. So in this case, what happens when the baseline is stabilizing means that means all the ion exchange sites are filled with H plus ions. So that means your baseline conductivity is going to be constant. Next, when the mobile phase carries the sample, sodium chloride, into the column, what happens is there is a first ion exchange that takes place. So sodium takes the place of H plus, and H plus is sent out. So this is the one. And now after some time, I keep flushing the column with mobile phase. What happens is there is a competition for one ion exchange site between one Na plus and several of H plus. So at one point he is pushed out. Of course, there are other chromatographic conditions also. I just want to make it very simple. So this is kind of a law of mass action. So now sodium is sent out. What happens? So as I said, we are not going to do it for sodium analysis only. It's not going to be for one component. It's going to be for multiple components in a mixture. So if you see this example, we are using a 15 centimeter column. You see the mobile phase concentration very, very diluted. So the consumption of chemicals is also very, very less, 3 millimolar. And how much we are going to use? 0.9 ml flow rate only. and sample amount is going to be injected is only 10 microliters. And with this, we are able to separate 6 ions in 20 minutes. Again, it's just an example, but we can even do 15 ions in 30 minutes, especially for cations, along with other amines also, like primary amines, secondary amines, etc. Now, in this example, I want to point out that if you see the first 4 ions, they are all singly positive. But if you see their size, lithium is smaller than sodium, then ammonium, then potassium. But if you see potassium and magnesium, what happens is potassium is bigger in size, but charge is less than magnesium. That is because magnesium is bound to two sides, two SO3 minus or two CO minus. So pulling him out is very difficult. So it is always the charge and size ratio which matters, which is going to determine who is going to go out first, which is going to be eluted out first. So this is what I want to convey here. So this is how you get a chromatogram. And if you see here, it is microsiemens per centimeter, which is a unit for conductivity. Okay, and we will see what is happening inside the conductivity detector later. And the x-axis, of course, it is a retention time, which is well known for you. And as you know, chromatography is a relative technique. So we plot a calibration curve with a set of standards, and then you run your sample and you compare the area under the curve with respect to this calibration curve. Okay. Now, similarly, anion exchange. So here again, if I want to do chloride and sodium chloride, so the same sample here. So I choose a anion exchanger column. I flush it with mobile phase, get a stable baseline, then introduce sodium chloride. This is what happens inside the column. Then again, there is a fight between several carbonate ions and Cl minus. So Cl minus is pushed out. So what happens is you get a chromatogram like this. So here, what happens is you can see 11 ions in 30 minutes or 35 minutes, but this is again an example. You can almost do 20 ions in 35 minutes. It is possible. Here again, as I said, the consumption of chemicals is very, very less. And the beauty of this technology is that you are able to do fluoride, chloride, bromide, etc. You can also do oxyhalides, chloride, ClO2, BrO3, ClO3, perchlorate, then nitrite. You can distinguish between nitrite and nitrate. We can see the importance. Then phosphate, sulfate. You can do sulfite also, sulfide, S2 minus also possible, SO3 2 minus is also possible. Then thiocyanate is possible, thiosulfate is possible. So it is a wonderful technique, especially for anions. So, I mean, we can tell you that there are no other technique which can handle so many anions in a single run. So that is the best part of ion chromatography. This is just a small animation which I wanted to show you, like how and exactly the separation happens. So whatever I've explained, it's just in the form of animation. So the white ones are the carbonate ions, that is CO3 2 minus. Now comes your green ones, which are chloride ions, and your red ones are nitrate ions. So you can see there is an exchange there. So red ions exchanging the white ions for those places. And at one point, what happens is white ion starts pushing out the green ions. So now starts the green ions which are coming. Now you see until the eluent ions are coming, you have a stable baseline. And then when the sample ions coming, you get a peak. So this is how it is. So your chloride comes out first, and then you have the red ones coming out next. So again, it comes back to the baseline where the eluent ions are flowing, and now again you have the nitrate ions, which are red ones, which are coming out. So this is how the separation happens, and this is how the exact mechanism happens. Now we saw what is the criteria. We saw what is there inside the column, what is there, what is the mobile phase which is used, which is normally water-based, and we have come now to the how the mechanism happens, and then we have now come to the detection part. So here, as I said, we are talking about ions, and ions will have high conductivity or low conductivity. The detector should be as sensitive as possible to determine this high or low conductivity at least, because the poorly dissociating ions, you need to find out them. So conductivity detector is also called as universal detector because all ions will have conductivity. That's the idea. And what happens here, what we measure actually is we have two electrodes. This is a flow cell basically, and you'll not imagine the flow cell volume is less than 1 microliters. So if this flow cell is less than 1 microliters, to be precise, it is around 0.8. And in this, we have two electrodes across which we apply a voltage. So V is known. And when the ion comes into this, there is a turbulence. And because of the turbulence, I mean, it starts conducting current. So you know I. So V equal to IR. So you know the Ohm's law. So now you are able to measure the resistance. Actually, you are measuring the resistance. And inverse of resistance is conductance. And because of the area of the plates as well as the distance, what we consider here, we term in terms of conductivity. So microsiemens per centimeter is the unit of conductivity with which we express the ionic conductivity. So this is how we do the, as I said, we are measuring the resistance. We do not measure the conductance. So that is important. It is all the algorithm which converts everything. So that is very important here. And most importantly, here the entire flow cell is kept under thermostated condition because per degree Celsius there is a variation of 2%. So the external influence will bother our results. So this flow cell is kept under a constant temperature. Let's say normally we keep 5 to 10 degrees above the room temperature. So if its room temperature is 25, we keep somewhere around 35 degrees Celsius. So this is how we do the analysis. Then we have one more detector. This is called amperometric or electrochemical detection. So what exactly is that? Is if I have to use this detector, the ion of interest or the analyte of interest should be redox active. So I should be able to reduce or I should be able to oxidize. That is very important with this detector. That means I cannot do chloride analysis, but as I can do chlorite analysis. Chlorite can be oxidized to chlorate. So that is possible. So I can do only those ions. So how it is done? So we have a 3 electrode setup. So which is, we have a working electrode, we have a reference electrode, and we have an auxiliary electrode. Reference electrode is normally we use silver chloride and 3 molar KCl, which is supposed to give you a constant potential, and it is not going to disturb. It should not react with our eluent or sample ions. It's going to be inert. And then we have the working electrode. Working electrode, there are different working electrodes. So for example, if I am using a gold electrode, we can do cyanide analysis. We can do carbohydrates. We can differentiate between different monosaccharides, different disaccharides, different oligosaccharides, different polysaccharides can be done. Then we can do amino acids. So these are the applications which can be done. So what happens here is we apply a voltage on the working electrode with respect to the reference electrode. So when we apply, reduction or oxidation happens, and that reduction current or oxidation current is measured across this working electrode and auxiliary electrode. So this auxiliary electrode is stainless steel. Again, it is inert, but it is used to measure the current across this. So this current is proportional to the analyte present in your sample. We do sample as well as standard in the same way. So that's, we are able to do this analysis. And you can see the picture also, it is clear. It's a little bit destructive. Light red becoming dark red. So that means it is clearly that your 5 to 10% of your analyte is getting destroyed. Okay, but anyway, but measuring current is very sensitive. So definitely we can use it for down the level PB level analysis. Now this is UV detector. This UV visible detector, you can compare it with your regular laboratory spectrophotometer, where you have a ion or analyte, you add a color, then you keep it in the cuvette holder, you record the absorbance, etc. Here, this is a flow cell concept. So same thing, when the ion comes out of the column, it is combined with the reagent addition, and then they mix, they form a characteristic color, which is going to absorb at a particular wavelength, or you can even have 8 different wavelengths also. That is also possible. So if you want to determine the kind of nature. So if you want to do any study, so you see here when the ion comes, there is a peak here. So that is how, and this is very popular for determination of, this is called photometric detection. So this, we use it for transition metal determination at low ppb levels for rare earth elements like even F block elements like lanthanum series, uranium, thorium also can be done. So with this, we can do this technique. Then of course, we can couple a MS or an ICP-MS as a one more detector instead of a conductive detector. If you want to go down the levels, or if you want to do speciation, etc. So normally MS is used for anions at lower levels, for anions, cations, organic acids, sugars, etc. Sugar profiling, I should say. Then ICP-MS normally for arsenic speciation, chromium speciation, selenium, down gadolinium, etc., down to PPT levels. So that is possible with, you can couple it with MS or ICP-MS. So this gives you a comprehensive view of what is possible with ion chromatography. So with respect to the periodic table, so all those who have color, so Metrum has notes. We have established notes, be it whatever matrix, we can do it for you. And here, the most important which I want you to observe is not only the key says about which detector can be used, the most important thing is you can do speciation. So arsenic 3, arsenic 5, selenium 4, selenium 6, platinum 4, platinum 6. Then you have iron 2, iron 3, chromium 3, chromium 6. So this is very important with respect to ion chromatography. With simple detectors like conductivity, UV, and amperometric, we are able to address these concerns, address these requirements with respect to ion chromatography. So what in general we can do? Anions, cations, transition metals, lanthanides, uranium, thorium, speciation, as I said, organic acids, fatty acids, amino acids, carbohydrates, aliphatic and biogenic amines. So you are, with one instrument, we are able to do several analysis. So that's the versatility of this technique. So why ion chromatography? Versatile and cost saving. Simple laboratory chemicals you use. Simultaneous determination of multiple ions. More advantages than spectroscopy techniques. No gases involved. Just a 2 feet tall instrument with a slightly more than a A4 size paper, the footprint, and no gas, no lamps, no breaking of the civil structure. Nothing is required. So a simple workbench is more than sufficient for doing this technique, for performing this analysis down to PPT levels. So we saw basically element, we saw about what mobile phase we used and which is being constantly pumped through the system. Injector we saw, injector, you know how it works. Then the column we saw what is there, and detection also we saw. So there is one more additional device which is going to differentiate this technique from LC. That is your normal LC, which is called the suppressor, and this is mainly used for anions. So let us see how it is used. So the suppressor basically is used in anion analysis. Basically it's a device. It's a chemical device. So which is basically a cation exchanger when I use it for anion analysis. So what is its job? Its job is to retain or hold or trap all the cations, and in return it will provide hydrogen ions. So all your cations are trapped, and in return it is supposed to provide you hydrogen ions. Similarly, suppressor for cation analysis, it is basically an anion exchanger. It is supposed to hold all the anions, and in return, it will provide hydroxide ions. So exactly the opposite of anion suppressor. How it works, you will see. So the job of the suppressor is to reduce the background conductivity. That means the mobile phase conductivity, the eluent conductivity. And increases the analyte conductivity or analyte sensitivity. So let us see how it is. So the element what we have used is sodium carbonate bicarbonate, as I told you. So if I pass it through the suppressor, what happens is all the H plus Na plus is trapped, and in return it is enriched with H plus. So which is converting my element to carbonic acid, and further this breaks down to H2O and CO2. This H2O may not be pure, it may have dissolved carbon dioxide also. So what do we achieve here? Basically, high conductivity element is now brought down to a low conductivity element. So this is one job of the suppressor. And with respect to sample, if I inject sodium chloride, when it comes out of the suppressor, it comes out as hydrogen chloride. So all my salt form is being converted to acidic form. So why it is highly conductive? Because it is dissociation is very good. So that's why you call an acid, because the dissociation is very good. So because of this, the conductivity rises. Because of this, the sensitivity rises. Just because you convert it into H plus form. So how do we see pictorially? You can see it here. So sodium carbonate element has a conductivity, whatever concentration I showed you, let's say 3.2 millimolar or 1 millimolar. So this concentration is around, let's say 700 microsiemens. When I use a suppressor, because of getting converted to H2CO3 and later to H2O, it is somewhere between 10 to 20 microsiemens, which is around 15 microsiemens. And if you see the peak, sodium chloride peak and HCl peak, see how it is. So just because of the contribution from H plus ions, you have a huge difference in the peak height and of course peak area also. So because of this, or the presence of the suppressor, we are able to do ppb level analysis of anions, which is the normally requirement in semiconductor industry or power plant industry. And some places they are monitoring it very strictly. Okay, so this is very, very important. Now suppressor for cations, so whether it is required or not, we can decide. So how do we see here? So here, as I said, we are using nitric acid element. In this case, it's exactly the opposite. The anionic part is replaced. So how it is replaced? With OH minus. So it is now converted from high conductivity to low conductivity. Fine. The first job is done by the suppressor. Now let us look at the second job, whether it is doing justice. Now we have, if I inject sodium chloride, it will come out as sodium hydroxide. Fine, it is soluble in water. Similarly, potassium chloride will come out as potassium hydroxide. It is soluble in water. But the moment I go to the divalent ions or trivalent ions or amines, any form, even primary amines up to quaternary amines, their hydroxides are poorly soluble in this. So what happens? It leads to precipitation issues, and to a slight extent, they reduce the analyte conductivity also. So that also, there is a slight dip in the sensitivity. So basically, even if you say I am doing only sodium analysis, not a problem, I'm used a suppressor, but you are unaware that iron is present in that sample. So iron hydroxide will choke your suppressor and it is gone. And please note, so suppressor is basically consumable for any IC system. And do you want to buy suppressor for cations every 3 months? It will be a big mistake. So definitely it is not preferable. So you may ask us how to do cation analysis. So how do we do? That is why we employ nitric acid element, which is having, let's say, the example 3 millimolar. 3 millimolar nitric acid has around 900 microsiemens. There are some elements like methane sulfonic acid, which is same 3 millimolar, which is being operated, but instead of 900 microsiemens, methane sulfonic acid gives you a conductivity of around 2000. That means working with 900 is easy, or whether working with 2000 is easy. If I have to use analysis at 2000 microsiemens, I need to bring it down to zero. I cannot work with such a heavy, with a very high background. So we prefer to use nitric acid, which is much more simple, and every lab will have nitric acid for any chemistry, not methane sulfonic acid. So that is where there is a difference with respect to cation analysis with Metrome. So this is the reason we advise that we are able to do cation analysis without a suppressor. But for anion, we give suppressor And though it is a consumable, we give you 10-year warranty. Even if it goes bad in the 9th year, we give you free of cost replacement. Coming to the instrumentation part. So this is the basic instrument, how it looks. A green color cover, and left side you see the compact systems, and on the right side is the professional IC systems. Basically, when I open the door, this is how it looks. So this is nothing but a pump, the injector, the pulsation dampener. This is the purge valve. This is the suppressor. This is the column. This is the detector. And you see a space on top. We call it as an eluent organizer, where you house the bottles like this. And here also you have two pumps, two columns, two detectors, and one suppressor. This is basically a dual channel, the highest end system, which can be used for simultaneous anion and cation. That is possible. Suppose you want to run a gradient, that is changing the concentration of the eluent with respect to time. So we can combine these two pumps and run a high pressure gradient for anion analysis or cation analysis. That is possible with this system. And only difference between these two is this is an isocratic system and we cannot be upgraded to gradient. And this is a gradient system or an isocratic which can be upgraded later also. So this is an upgradable system, and this is only possibility is isocratic system. So that's the basic difference. Rest all the technical specification remains the same. So as I said, you see this is all made of PEEK. So all this we have covered. And most importantly, compact or professional systems, all the pump, column, and the detector, all three carry a microchip. So what is the advantage? So the moment I connect it to the software, it is automatically identified along with the serial number and part number. So your method will carry which part number pump, which article number, serial number pump you have used for your analysis. Every bit of information is captured by the software, and every that is carried with your method. And it's going to parameterize. Okay, this pump can go up to 5,000 psi. This can go up to 7,000 psi. So like this. So this is with respect to the pump, and then with respect to the column. So it will help you automatic recognition of the column type. See, in labs we hurry up so much in our analysis. So sometimes what happens is we choose an anion method, and probably by mistake we would have connected a cation column. So the moment I do this, it's going to say, no, sir, you have connected an anion, you have chosen an anion method, but you have connected a cation column. So there is a clash. So immediately it gives a pop. So this gives you a warning message. Okay, I have made a mistake. So you change the column to anion. So similarly, if the pressure is column is rated for 2000 psi, if the pressure exceeds because of some mishap down the line, so it's going to say, no, I'm going to shut down the system. Similarly, if you try to set flow rate more than 1 ml or more than 1.5 ml, even if you set 1.51 and the column is rated for 1.5, it's going to say, no, you cannot. The best part is the microchip helps you in documenting the injections, documenting the working hours. So this gives you a fairly an idea, like this column has lasted for this much injections for any particular project. For example, in pharma, they do many API projects. So they'll come to know, okay, this has lasted for 2000 injections. This has lasted for 3000 injections, like this. So that is one more advantage. So this is with respect to chip on the column. As I said, these are three different types of suppressors. And this is a low capacity. This is a high standard capacity. And this is a very high capacity for high ionic strength eluents. And low capacity is used for 2 mm ID columns, and standard is used for 4 mm as well as 2 mm, both can be used. And high capacity is majority used for 4 mm ID column for high ionic strength eluents, and all three carry 10-year warranty. So this is a picture of electrochemical detector, how it is used. This is the cell what we use in electrochemical detector. You can see it here. Different cells are there. So this is what is the different cells. And we have gold, we have platinum, we have glassy carbon, and we have silver electrode. So different electrodes can be used for different applications. And there are vast applications with respect to electrochemical detections. And this is, as I said, the eight data channel. That is where you can set in 8 different wavelengths at a time. If you want to study, it's possible. This is a diode detector from Metron. And then if you have number of samples is exceeding 20 per day, so I would prefer an auto sampler. So right from 36 position auto sampler to 220 positions we have, and we also have a HPLC based auto sampler, which is normally used for microliter pickup, especially for amino acids or carbohydrates. And we have a tray cooling facility also, because there are certain samples in biological labs where it is thermally not stable. So we have to cool the samples also. So we have a tray cooling facility up to 4 degrees Celsius. So this is possible with our instruments. So then we have the MagicNet software, which is going to be, you can understand very easily. It goes by the symbols. So we have 5 symbols, basically. Workplace, where we see the live chromatograms. This is a database where there is a data management and reprocessing, where you can see where you store the data. And then you have the method platform for method development, method icon. The configuration, of course, it is done automatically, but still, to be on the safer side and going to change anything if you want to, or if you want to show the instruments, you can see, and manual control in case of any emergency. So these are the 5 icons. It's completely 21 CFR Part 11 compliant, and it can be used in regulatory environment, especially in food and pharma. Apart from MagicNet, which is our own dedicated software, we have also tied up with Waters Empower software, because Empower can control our IC instruments. Similarly, OpenLab from Agilent can control our IC instruments. So this is possible. This makes your life easier if you are in a pharma company and if you are used to Empower or OpenLab. No additional training is required. So you already know how to use the software. It is just the connection of the instruments and you start operating. That is the idea. Let us see some interesting sample preparation techniques. So this is really interesting here. So how we will see, first thing is why we should do filtration of the samples. That is because we are using 4 micron to 10 micron particles in the column. So even if particle of 1 micron goes and sits inside the column, you can forget the column. So you have to maintain the column. That means you have to filter the sample. You have to filter the mobile phase with at least 0.45, but preferable is 0.22 micron. This can also be automated. How do you automate? We have an accessory where you place there is a plexiglass between which you use a filter. This is a 0.2 micron filter, and on the one side you send in the sample at a very high speed. Reason being, the bigger particles will not stick to the filter paper. And on the other side, you aspirate at a very low speed so that the liquid film is continuous. So now this is directly connected to the injector where you're going to fill the loop. So how it benefits you? You don't have to filter the samples yourself. Prevents contamination while filtering. If you have an auto sampler, it's unattended, and you don't have to use one filter paper for every sample. You can have with one filter paper, you can filter at least multiple determinations. So at least 15 to 20, which we can say. So this is definitely time saving, and it leads to lower operating cost. Similarly, there is one more sample preparation technique called dialysis. What it does is, this is exclusively for those samples which has very high organic load. For example, milk, for example, coolants, for example, oil in water, emulsions, for example, industrial effluents, which is having heavy organic load. But still, I have to do anions, I have to do cations, I have to do carbohydrates. So how do I do? So this is the setup. Similar, slightly more than a filtration setup, but it's not filtration. So what we do is, one side we send in the sample at a very high speed. On the other side, we send in ultra pure water, rinse it, and hold it for some time like this. For let's say 10 minutes or 20 minutes, 10 minutes or 15 minutes. During that time, what happens is, you can see here that ion starts moving from one higher concentration to lower concentration. I am taking ultra pure water, that means it is devoid of ions. So here you can see the ions moving from one side to the other side. What I'm trying to achieve this side is concentration same as this side. So we have seen dialysis rate at 96% with 5 to 10 ml sample. We are able to achieve more than 96% here. And that is, since standard and sample are treated the same way, we are injecting directly into the loop. And thus, you are able to do samples with very high molecular weight compounds, which can be analyzed without any problems. So you can do anions or cations in or organic acids or sugars, sugar profiling in any kind of difficult samples. So why do we do all these things? To increase the lifetime of the analytical column. So this is about the couple of interesting sample preparation techniques. Then we have an hyphenated setup. This is called a combustion IC system. This is basically used for determination of halides and sulfur in single run. There is no other technique where we can do halides and sulfur in a single run. So what is the importance? We can see with some examples, but let us see how it works. Suppose, as you know, Bharat BS6. What is the BS6? It is a norm which says that sulfur in petrol has to be less than 10 ppm. So that is you have to strictly adhere to. So many companies are changing their instrumentation, everything. So to meet this norm, how do they do? So you need to analyze that. How do they do? So they take gasoline or petrol, and then they charge it on a quartz board which has a quartz wool. Let's say 100 microliters, and then they send it into a combustion oven which can go up to 1150 degrees Celsius. So here it is combusted. The combusted gases are here. It can be, if it has halides and sulfur, it will have HX and X2, or HI, HCl, HBr, HI, whatever you see. Then all forms of SOX, SO2, SO3, SO4, all will be here. Now, this will be carried by a carrier gas, which is argon, normally inert. So that is bubbled through a absorption solution consisting of water, ultra pure water with 100 ppm of hydrogen peroxide. So this hydrogen peroxide, which is a oxidizing agent, will convert all forms of sulfur to sulfates, which is normally done by ion chromatography. And anyway, halides will become as F minus or Cl minus or Br minus or I minus. So this is then automatically injected into ion chromatography. This is entire setup is completely operated using a single software. So with this, we are able to do gasoline, that is petrol or diesel or biodiesel, etc. We can monitor sulfur content, which is whether it is less than 10 ppm. Of course, you can calculate how much of sulfur is there in sulfate. So this is just an example. So other analyses are like printed circuit boards, resins, cables. You know that cables, printed circuit boards, they should have a limited, there is a limitation of chloride and bromide being used in the adhesives. Because if there is a fire, it may lead to a lot of smoke. That means it may lead to some ecological disaster. So there is a limitation. So much amount of only chloride and bromide can be used. Similarly, polymers. So there is a company which is using our system where the inner aircraft parts are made up of these polymers only. So they are monitoring continuously the sulfur content in that. Similarly, pharmaceutical products, raw substances, solvents, intermediates can be checked by this combustion IC system. So some examples I can show you. This is polyethylene pellets, some polymers, as I said, then rubber samples, bromide they wanted to do, then cyclohexane, some solvents, then viscous polyisobutene, then quality control of fuel. So just see, at one point we were at 15,000 ppm, and now we have come down to 10 ppm. So much is the regulation being followed. Then there is analysis of coal. So that is also one of the applications in power plants. So coming to the applications, I'll quickly go through. IC has been approved as a technique by US EPA, that is US Environmental Protection Agency. Then we have the ASTM. Then we have the AFA is there. Then American Water Works Association is there. Then approved by pharmacopoeial regulatory authorities like United States Pharmacopoeia, European Pharmacopoeia, Japanese, Chinese, Indian, ISO, then European norms. DIN is the German norms. AOAC is again for food mainly. So all these have approved IC as a technique, and these are the certain norms officially which is available. And with respect to a new norm, I thought I will introduce this is ASTM D8001, where they have suggested to use IC. IC has been recommended for total nitrogen, gel nitrogen, and total phosphorus in water and wastewater. So how do we do? So we do a persulfate digestion. So water and wastewater. So you get total nitrogen and phosphorus. If you don't do the digestion, you get the inorganic nitrogen and phosphorus. You subtract, you get the gel nitrogen. So this is one more, just to show you that IC has been approved by ASTM for this technique, for this analysis. Then, as I said, just for example, I want to show you that, as I said, 18 ions in half an hour or 35 minutes. So you see here, not only fluoride and chloride, we are able to do organic acids also. Gluconate, glycolate, formate, acetate, we are doing it as organic anions. So that is very good with respect to the technique. I mean, you don't find any other technique which can do all these analysis possible. So it's a very good tool for doing such ions. Then coming to the environmental analysis, so we have river water monitoring. You can monitor your groundwater, raw water. You can monitor lake water, pond water, ice, pore water, etc. So many analysis is possible. Then EPA 300.1, it says you have to monitor chloride, bromate, and fluoride under 5 ppb. So that it's possible along with other ions. So you can see the separation of bromate with high amounts of chloride. So that is one more thing. So why we have to monitor bromate? Because bromate is a known carcinogen. So during ozonation of source water, bromide gets converted to bromate, which is carcinogenic, and WHO guideline is 10 ppb. So we can, in tap water, we can even go down to 0.13 ppb, but this is with photometric detection. Of course, we can do by conductivity also. And with respect to bromate, our country, we have modified, BIS has modified this 14543 norm where they have included IC. This is because BRC raised an alarm that 27% of packaged drinking water available in Bombay has more than 10 ppb bromate. This was raised an alarm, and thus BIS has implemented IC as one of the methods for monitoring bromate in packaged drinking water. So several of the commercial labs have our instrument for monitoring bromate analysis by conductivity analysis. This is one of the examples, oxohalides and besides standard anions. So you can see here, so bromate, the presence of chloride. Then we have silicate analysis, which can be done. Then aliphatic amines. So this is used as a starting material in many of the chemical and pharmaceutical industries. So we have, normally they are discharged into aquatic systems, but the moment you release, so they react with nitrite to form carcinogenic nitrosamines, which is dangerous. Aliphatic amines, so this can also be done. So this is an example of chromatogram. Then we have the complexation reagents in tap water. This is an agricultural water which had come, and we can do this analysis. Then we have anions in water, sulfide and cyanide in refinery process water, where we had gone down to less than 0.5 ppb. Then Phelan analysis. Even if you take IS 10500 2012, our drinking water norms, uniform drinking water standards, you can see that phenol has been mentioned, cyanide is mentioned, sulfide is mentioned, many of the ions are mentioned, including transition metals. So these can also be, all can be handled by IC. Transition metals, here again, we can use it with the UV visible detector. Then lanthanides, we did it for the Department of Atomic Energy. This is using simple conductivity detection. We can also do by UV detector as well. Chromium, what is the importance? Hexavalent chromium is very toxic, it's mobile and carcinogenic again. So we can do chromium analysis. Quite famous applications are chromium in tannery waste, Then you do it in toys. That is also a famous application. Then there are some labs who are working on soil remediation. So to remove chromium, many people are finding out some nanofilters, nanomaterials projects are going on for removal of chromium. So then we have a chromium speciation, which can be done in single run, chromium 3, chromium 6. So that is possible. Then arsenic. Again, if you go to the northeastern, right from Uttarakhand to northeast, entire area is completely groundwater is full of a lot of arsenic is there. And a lot of research is going on in many famous institutes like IIT and ICES there. So where arsenic 3 is more toxic and arsenic 5. So they are interested in speciation. So this can be done by conductivity detector itself. So you can see here, this is a chromatogram where arsenic and selenium has been speciated. Then ion speciation can be done with respect to environmental. Soil can be done, soil, water, anions in soil, iodide in soil extracts. And pesticide analysis. As I said, IS 10500 2012, a drinking water protocol, has pesticides which can be done by LC. And we are not saying IC can be used as a pesticide analyzer. It is not like that. If you have pesticide analysis along with an ion analysis, you can attach a UV detector and connect a RP18 reverse phase column. So that will solve your purpose instead of separately investing on a instrument. So this is one more pesticides. Then anionic surfactants, some of the anionic long chain anionic surfactants. Then cationic surfactants are possible with IC. Cations in biodiesel, then free glycerol and total glycerol in biodiesel, antioxidants in biodiesel, biofuels, chloride and potential sulfate in bioethanols, then cations in ethanol, food industry. So our own standards authority, food safety and standards authority of India has recommended IC as a technique. Of course, they have recommended for only 3 analysis, but several of the analysis can be done which are being handled by wet analysis. So for example, here it's measurement of anions in drinking water, bromate in packaged drinking water, and nitrite in meat and meat products and fish products. So they have recommended, this is bromate analysis in flour. They actually added, improve the duff gluten stronger and more, make it more elastic. So if it is too much, we can always monitor in the bread whether the presence of bromate is not there or not. Similarly, nitrite and nitrate in milk, then melamine in milk powder. So we have seen that normally when they, to improve the nitrogen content, which normally the protein content, they fake it with melamine, addition of melamine. Preferred suggested method is LCMS and GCMS, not required. IC with a UV detector with a simple cation column with which we are doing the other cations can be used for melamine analysis. That is possible. This is glucose and fructose in honey, gives you a quality control whether the honey is fine or not based on certain parameters. Then lactose and lactose-free milk. There are people we are coming across, like they have lactose intolerance. So you want to monitor this, you can do. And polyphosphates in sausages, it is possible to do. And carbohydrate analysis in instant coffee. Then malt extracts, polysaccharide analysis, inulin. Then amino acids, according to USP 1052 method, you can do it in meat also. We have done in pork meat in one of the institutes. This is pharma examples, phosphate and phosphate in ibandronate sodium. It is not only phosphate and phosphate is present as impurities. Along with ibandronate assay, we can do. So that is the idea of this analysis. This phosphate binding capacity, this free sulfate in enoxaparin sodium. These are all impurities in API. This is sulfate and sulfamate. This is nitrate analysis. This is MSA in an anti-cancer drug, busulfan. Power plants where chloride, nitrate, sulfate, these are all anions which are causing corrosion. It is possible. So this is what we have done, 400 ppt and 50 ppt of sulfate. We can also do cation analysis and amines analysis. in same power plants. So sodium, we have done 244 ppt or 0.244 ppb in presence of high amounts of ammonium. So this is again silicate in same power plants. This is what I said. You can do almost 15 ions in half an hour. Half an hour, 40 minutes. You can see anion, you can see cations, transition metals, and amines. And this is corrosion inhibitors in cooling water. This is with respect to hyphenation with ICP-MS, like speciation of chromium, selenium. See the levels, they have gone up to 100 ppt, that is 0.1 ppb. Then we have arsenic speciation, including monomethyl arsenic. Then we have mercury speciation, which is nothing but the Minamata disease. You must have come across mercury and methyl mercury. IC has been coupled with the C18 column with an ICP-MS. So that was the wide range of applications which you can cover. A wide range of applications right from PPT to gram per liter level. Definitely it is time and cost saving, and we have robust instruments across. So any doubts can write to us